Doctor Who and the word continuity go hand in hand, whether that be fans complaining about the unit dating controversy or the TARDIS windows being the wrong size. There's always been a demand for things to feel right and natural, even if the show is about an alien with two hearts flying through space and time in a police box. However, there is merit in wanting familiarity. Indeed, many times in Classic Who we revisited characters or locations, whether that be returning to Peladon or seeing the Brigadier again. So when Doctor Who returned in the 21st century, showrunner Russell T Davies wanted to make sure he could establish a sense of continuity with the viewers. Even though he had made sure there were recurring characters for present-day Earth episodes, he always wanted to bring back familiar settings, leading him to plan a return to New Earth from the episode of the same name in Series 2. This episode became Gridlock, which sees the Doctor take Martha to New Earth in her first trip to an alien world, where she finds herself kidnapped and trapped in a never-ending traffic jam as an old enemy lurks at the bottom of the motorway and an old friend waits in the city above. So over 13 years later, does Gridlock hold up, and is it still good? Yes. Oh yes, very much so.
So you take care now. Drive safely.
The opening of Gridlock is incredibly well done. The cold open is vintage New Who, establishing the setting and the threat instantly by introducing us to two random characters and killing them off immediately. It sets up a great mystery as they die, effectively using the cold open exactly how it's intended, giving us that peek into the story, a nice teaser as the titles kick in. As the episode starts properly, we get a good little scene inside the TARDIS as the Doctor decides to take Martha on another trip, stretching the idea of only one trip because he doesn't really want to be alone. He needs that companion with him, even though he finds it hard to admit. It's a nice character touch. It's also nice how Martha wants to go to Gallifrey. It makes perfect sense for a new companion to want to go to the Doctor's planet because he's this time-travelling alien from another world. So who wouldn't want to see the home of these majestic Time Lords? I also like how they describe Gallifrey, with the Doctor forever playing in the background to add emotion to the scene. Russell T Davies' lines and David Tennant's performance do such a great job describing it, and you really feel the Doctor's nostalgia for the home he lost. It's a perfect moment. We then find out that he has brought Martha to New Earth, which is a great idea. We're already familiar with the setting from Series 2, so it's easy to just slip back into that world, especially because we understand that there's something wrong with New Earth now, since it wasn't like this when we left it. It gives that sense of continuity but also progression, indicating to the viewer that time has changed and it's not the same. It's not some static world that never moved past what we saw in the last adventure. It's also good for showing how the Doctor is treating Martha like a rebound because he's taken her to the first place he took Rose in this new incarnation, showing how she's still dominating his mind and his thoughts since they were separated. As much as I hate the unrequited love storyline, I'm glad they address it here by having Martha call him out on it. It shows her awareness as a character, understanding immediately that she's playing second fiddle to Rose and standing against the Doctor for acting like this. It would appear more prominently in the Lazarus experiment, but it's nice to have it brought up here to show that the characters are aware of this behaviour and how Martha is in Rose's shadow to the viewer, who was used to Rose after 2 years. Rather than the sweeping applegrass landscape we saw in Series 2, Martha and the Doctor are thrown into a dingy slum filled with drug vendors. I like the scene of the vendors opening up their stalls. There's playful music, but they're selling emotions as drugs. It creates a strange dissonance and dystopian feeling, because it's not some guy in an Adidas tracksuit rocking up in a Vauxhall Corsa, rolling down his window and handing over a baggie of weed. It's an established vendor in the streets, creating a really good dystopian atmosphere by showing just how far this prospering society has plummeted and descended into degeneracy and filth, to the extent that this kind of thing is just normalised rather than shunned. I like to think that the woman who buys Forget is the daughter of the people from the cold open, but even if she isn't, it does a good job furthering the mystery, because she explains that people who go on the motorway never come back. Then, in a really smart move, Martha gets kidnapped just a few seconds later, and guess where she's taken? That's right, the motorway. I like the Doctor's rage at Martha being kidnapped. Even though he isn't supposed to care a whole lot about her, he treats her like any other companion, and becomes protective of her. It shows how much of an impact she's already made on him, along with showing his caring personality. It's also good that the Doctor threatens the expositional drug vendors to shut up shop by the time he gets back. It makes sense because he'd never stand for this stuff, so it feels in character and addresses that normalization of the drug industry in this setting, by having having our main protagonist, an outsider, denounce it emphatically. We then get our first proper look at the motorway we've heard so much about, with a good scene of the Doctor standing in the lay-by and struggling to breathe because of all the fumes. It does a lot to establish the toxic severity of the motorway, before we meet the brilliant Brannigan, the wisecracking Irish catman who is a great side character. Brannigan and his wife Valerie are great for showing the consequences of the motorway, because they've been driving for an entire 12 years. It shows the normalisation of this lifestyle because they've only gone 5 miles in that time, but act like it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just the way things are. This is their world and they don't know any different by this point. I think it's great world building that achieves a similar effect to the drug vendors, showing this normalization of dystopian concepts that seem outlandish to us, but are just how things are in this world. Brannigan calling the Cassini couple is a good scene that shows us how the motorway has become almost like a little community, because people only have contact between them and other cars. From a contemporary perspective, we can easily relate this to the 2020 pandemic, and the lockdown it caused, which forced everyone to form a community spirit while stuck inside their own houses. It makes this aspect of the episode more relatable because of this new hindsight, being able to understand how these drivers feel and why they act the way they do. There's no way of contacting the outer world, so all they have is each other. It helps to set up the emotional payoff at the end, but it also gives the Doctor a good way to be able to start tracking Martha down, since one of the Cassinis is a car spotter, so she knows which cars have joined the motorway, narrowing down the search and moving the plot along smoothly. Having the Doctor and Martha separated in different cars for the whole episode is a great idea. It solves a lot of pacing issues by cutting between the two to show how they're reacting to the scenarios they're placed in. Having the carjackers turn out to be nice people does a lot to sell us on this dystopian world, because it shows the desperation of the population that they resort to stuff like this to try and reach a better life. It also means they aren't really villains, so Martha can have some nice character building moments with them during her side of the story, as she gets to know them. There's a great scene where they start to hear a loud monstrous noise outside of the car. Milo insists it's just the air vents, but Sheen brings up stories about how it's something living down there that makes cars vanish. At first she sounds excited, like a kid telling ghost stories they don't really believe in, but then she trails off and looks scared as she realises it's probably true. It's a nice touch. It's also good that Martha realises that the air vent story can't be true, because the vents clearly aren't working or don't exist because of all the fumes. It's a good way to further establish the threat lurking below, along with showing Martha's smarts. I like the Doctor's determination to find Martha, causing him to clash with Brannigan and Valerie, who refuse to join the fast lane in pursuit. It establishes the Doctor's guilty conscience, along with showing how terrified everyone is of the fast lane, amping up the danger Martha is in down below. I also like how the Doctor uses the Cassini's car spotting hobby as a way to reveal that there are no police and no ambulances, revealing that the people on the motorway are alone, abandoned. It's a good Doctor moment, especially because he's wrong.
I think you know us so well, Doctor. We're not abandoned. Not while we have each other.
The daily contemplation is a great, bittersweet and solemn moment that does wonders for the world building, as everyone on the motorway joins together in song. It's amazingly directed and shot, becoming very emotional and touching as it shows that community aspect of the people trapped on the motorway. Like I mentioned earlier, it's that acknowledgement of the optimism in this kind of horrifying setting, showing how the human spirit prevails and keeps people in hope, unified and with a real sense of community. I suppose you could compare the daily contemplation to the clapping for the NHS that happened during lockdown. A regular routine that gives people a chance to reflect and come together, despite being physically apart. I think Gridlock does a good job showing this kind of community spirit with the daily contemplation. It shows the underlying optimism in a lot of Russell T Davies stories, despite the cynical settings and pessimistic overtones. After this touching scene is over, the Doctor decides to take matters into his own hands and reach Martha by himself, jumping from car to car. It's an imaginative use of the setting, underlined by the more action-packed segment of The Doctor Forever. It's fast-paced and fun as the Doctor finds himself passing through all of these weird and wacky car interiors. It also shows how much he actually cares about Martha and how he feels guilty for putting her in danger. As the Doctor is searching for Martha, Milo and Sheen realise that all the exits are closed, so they can't leave the motorway. This alone adds a lot of panic to the episodes, but it's made even better as the car behind them begs for them to get out of there to escape, before being killed, proving that there's something out there. And as we soon find out, that something is Macra, apparently. But we all know there's no such thing as a Macra. The reveal of the Macra is really good. The Doctor temporarily clears the fumes to get a look at the mysterious shapes and lights below, eventually seeing the giant crabs for what they are. Macra. It then cuts to Martha's car desperately trying to weave through the claws to escape, which is a great way to showcase the threat now that we know what it is. I think the Doctor explains the Macra well, explaining how they used to use humans as slaves to mine gas and build empires, but now they've devolved into beasts. It's a good way to pay homage to Classic Who's Macra Terror story, along with giving a new take on the monster. It's good that Martha once again thinks on her feet and realises that they'll be safer if they shut everything down, showing her quick thinking again like in Smith and Jones. However, the stakes are retained by giving them just 8 minutes of air left. It transitions the threat from the Macra to the aircon, furthering the good pacing by giving them something new to worry about and keeping them in danger. As Martha tries to survive in the car, Novice Haim hunts the Doctor down in order to take him to the face of Bo. It's another nice way of pacing the episode, stopping the Doctor from immediately having to save Martha, prolonging the story naturally. It's also nice that he's initially happy to see Novice Haim until he remembers what she did back in New Earth in Series 2. It's a good way of showing consequences and continuation. Novice Haim takes the Doctor to the new New York Senate in a great reveal.
But you're inside the Senate right now.
It's a really strong moment as we find out the entire planet died from a virus in just 7 minutes. The idea of the entire planet's population and society collapsing in 7 minutes is a bit extreme, but it's important to remember that science fiction often ramps these things up to a more dramatic scale, to prove a point and provide commentary. It shows how easily everything we know can fall apart, how something so simple can spiral into the complete destruction of our way of life. I think it succeeds well in that aspect. It's a good reason for the motorway being sealed, showing that it was an act of protection rather than anything sinister, which is a good twist to the formula. The presence of the face of Bo is a good way to create a connected, cohesive universe, because we've seen him twice before, so he's familiar to us as the viewer. It could have been used as a simple trick to make you clap your hands and say, I know what that is, but they use Bo and Haim in a good way that services the plot and makes sense given the world we've been presented with. Novice Haim and Bo staying to protect the motorway is a good way of redeeming Haim, since it was a choice. They could have left, but they chose to protect people, wiring the face of Bo up to the city's power supply and keeping everyone in the motorway alive. I think this draws some parallels between Bo and the Doctor, beyond the obvious one of them being the last of their kinds. Bo has a companion in Haim, just like how the Doctor has a companion, and Bo is willing to sacrifice himself at a moment's notice to save the lives of others, just like the Doctor is. I think it's a very overlooked aspect of the episode, but it works well to show these elements of the Doctor's lifestyle from a different perspective. Meanwhile, Martha is running out of time in the fast lane. Martha holds out hope for the Doctor as they're losing air. It's a good way of showing how much she believes in him, although it continues pushing that unrequited love storyline. Her telling Milo and Sheen about the Doctor and how he'll save them is a really good touch, because he's a stranger to all three of them, but Martha convinces them he'll save them. It's a clever way of seeding the Series 3 finale, where she uses stories of the Doctor to give people faith and save the day. And much like Martha knew, the Doctor is able to save the people on the motorway. There's a great climactic action scene of the car racing through the Macra, with all the strange creatures adding a real fast-paced, intense and exciting atmosphere, showing Murray Gold's incredible musical brain. Then the Doctor opens up the motorway, leading to an incredible scene of the sunlight flooding in, with the Doctor forever playing as all of the characters we met along the way react to finally seeing the sun after all of these years. It's such an emotional, triumphant moment that really feels earned. But I also feel like there's a bittersweet and tragic aspect to it. Sure, these people are free at last, but there's nothing for them outside. Their world is dead, along with everything and everyone they once knew. Their freedom has come at a cost, because they'll have to completely restart this planet and their society. But despite this, I still think it's a hopeful ending, because the characters we met along the way showed us this community spirit they developed, which makes you feel confident they can effectively rebuild build and work together, since they all stuck together during their time stuck on the motorway. I think the ending does a good job showing this duality and nuance, especially because of the rendition of Abide With Me right at the end. However, right after this feel-good moment, we get the heart-shattering realization that the face of Bo is dying, because he used all of his life support to save the city and open the motorway. It's a really emotional scene that makes you feel sad for a giant head with weird little tentacle things. It's truly a testament to the stellar writing and acting from everyone involved. The parallels between Bo and the Doctor are a nice touch.
I am the last of my kind, as you are the last of yours, Doctor.
Bo's final message of the Doctor not being alone is a great mystery, a cryptic hint to the finale, which gives it a fantastic payoff. Including the scene where Bo dies, there are about 5 full minutes of post-action, which is one of the most underrated parts of the episode. It ends the main conflict, but then gives us 5 minutes of solid character work and reflection. As they're leaving, Martha confronts the Doctor on his secretive nature, showing her backbone, and the Doctor ends up recalling Gallifrey in a really good scene, underlined by the beautiful rendition of Abide With Me, the episode fading out as the Doctor describes the landscape of Gallifrey, giving you the impression that he told her about it for hours and hours after the episode ends, reminiscing on the home he lost during the worst period of his long life. Much like the people of the motorway, he lost everything, but unlike them, he was left alone, with no one to help him rebuild what he lost. I think it's very powerful, and shows the true emotional consequences of the Time War, and the Doctor being the last of his kind. It's the perfect ending to the episode, and it does so much for both characters and the world building, along with setting up the next story, since the Doctor explains how the Time Lords fought the Daleks in that fateful war. It allows Martha to go into the next story with an understanding of what the Daleks represent to the Doctor, which is very helpful because it's an episode focusing heavily on his relationship with the monster. I'm absolutely confident in saying Gridlock is one of my favourite Doctor Who episodes to ever air. It's an utterly incredible piece of media that's Russell T Davies' Doctor Who in its purest form. From the very start we get drawn into this world and everything feels so grounded and real. Sure, the basic idea stems from how traffic jams can be annoying, but it dials it up to Doctor Who scale perfectly by locking normal people into this dystopian world with no understanding of why this is happening to them. All of the side characters are distinct and well developed, along with Tennant and Adjaman being on top form as the Doctor and Martha. Martha is especially great in this episode, showing her intelligence and backbone, along with being witty and snarky in the best ways.
Rumour has it you can reach up to 30 miles per hour.
Wow, that's like crazy.
Oh, and the Doctor gets to cuddle a kitten. Instant 10 out of 10 for that alone. But seriously, the episode is brilliant and it's paced perfectly. The action scenes and intense moments come at all the right times, creating a smooth, fast pace that flies by in an exhilarating adventure. It makes you feel a range of emotions throughout and it looks great for the time, being directed magnificently by Richard Clarke, who would go on to win an award for the Doctor's wife. So you know he's good. Gridlock is absolutely an S rank on the Series 3 tier list. It fully deserves the high praise. It's simply the quintessential Russell T Davies Doctor Who episode, a clear standout from the era. Some classic Who fans have issues with how the macro are used, but I think they're used really well because they're not really a proper monster in this. They're there to aid the narrative, they're not the focus. It's a thrilling episode with a great setting, and you don't even notice that most of the episode is spent inside the same car set because the story is so well written and paced. Murray Gold's score is used extremely well in this episode and helps to make so many moments engaging and memorable. It's a brilliant showcase of his talents. If you're looking for a great Russell T Davies era Doctor Who episode to watch and have a great time, you can't get much better than this. It is utterly magnificent.
Absolutely exquisite.
And I'd like to give a special thank you to my gold level patron Steph McNevin Miller and my diamond level patron Mark Hippold Guy Taylor. Thank you a lot for your support.